So welcome all. Great to see you. Let's start without further ado. That's a good idea, Helen. Let's do what you do. Helen's sitting in a cross-leg position with, I think she's sitting with blocks underneath her bum, but you're going to anyway. If you haven't got blocks, which is normal, most people don't, you'll have books. And I've found that cookery books seem to be a good size. And it seems that a sort of roughly, this sort of size book times 2 makes up about the same thickness as a yoga block. So you could do multiples of blocks. I'll do that, of books rather, to make up blocks. I'll do the same. Not everyone is comfortable in this pose, sukhasana. So sitting on blocks should help. Taking a blanket is essential when you're sitting on blocks, because otherwise the legs, what happens is the legs just keep traveling, and it pulls the pelvis forwards, which we want, but we don't want the pelvis to travel forwards too much. Otherwise we feel like we're falling, and we tighten our lower backs to sit up, so we don't want that. So to avoid the legs falling, we take a blanket. We raise it up like that, like people do perhaps at football matches when they're waving the scarf of their favorite football people, or at concerts in the 1970s when people went to see the Bakersy Bowlers and so on. Anyway, goes underneath your shins, not too much waving around, goes underneath the shins, and the buttock should be drawn out and back. If there is no comfortable way for you to sit in sukhasana, and that can happen if there's meniscal injuries, the meniscus is cartilage in between the tibia, which is the lower shin bone, I should do it that way, tibia and femur, then you can fold your legs back instead, and that sometimes is more comfortable. For certain kinds of meniscal tear, there are several kinds of meniscal tear, but hopefully you haven't got any of them, and you might be comfortable like this, or comfortable with your legs folded back in what's called virasana. Having sat on whatever you're sat on, draw the buttock flesh out and back. A few more people coming in now, welcome, welcome. Drawing the buttock flesh out and back. We try to encourage nasal breathing because it humidifies and warms and filters and slows the breath. Nasal breathing, breathing through your nose. But it also helps to isolate the condition of the nervous system here and now, because the sinus membranes are very sensitive. They respond very sensitively to how your nervous system is. If you're a little bit up, a little bit sympathetic, dominant, which to be honest most of us are until full awakening, then the sinus membranes do tend to flare up a little bit, and that does restrict, makes it a little harder to breathe through the nose. So again, breathing through the nose can help highlight that, and then you can do something about it. You can reverse engineer the situation. In other words, you can release the symptom to move away from the cause. So that's one of the theories that yoga is based on, reverse engineering. You go to the symptom to release the cause. The cause of the symptom is tension tightness. The cause of that tension tightness is uncertainty. The cause of that uncertainty is placing yourself somewhere where there's no actual information. There might be conceptual ideas, but when we mean actual information, real, tangible, atomic, even information, real information, not just concepts. There is real information when the mind's making concepts, but that real information is more about the way the mind moves than it is the contents of the mind. So anyway, that's what we're going to start with. Breathing through the nose and visualizing. That's one of the techniques we use, if you can visualize. And or feeling. And or emoting. In other words, shifting your mental emotional state to conduce to that sort of softening showing up in the easefulness, and increasing easefulness that comes in the breathing, because the sinus membranes stop being so inflamed. So it's a really great way to calm down. And of course, even if you're only interested in yogic movements for their own sake, you know, even if you're just like, oh, I just saw the picture in the book of someone doing Paschimottanasana, forward bend, I want to do it like they do, even if that's your only goal, which I'm sure it isn't, then calming the nerves stops the muscles going into tension just in the same way that the sinus membranes might. Incidentally, while I'm sitting here softening my sinus membranes, part of what's happening, part of what's sympathizing with the project is movement. My pelvis is moving back and forth, side to side. And notice the way I've termed that. My pelvis is moving. I didn't say I'm moving the pelvis. I said the pelvis is moving. So it might circle or it might drift forwards and backwards. It's not that you're doing it, it's that you're allowing it. And the sign that you're not doing it, but that you're allowing it, is that the breath doesn't come up into a tense breathing pattern or shallow breathing pattern, such as it does when we come out of real information. This is very profound, very wonderful opportunity to come into real information. And the side effect of that is doubt disappears. Now we're going to further intimate real information, our willingness, our happiness, our commitment to giving to the information here and now by chanting yes in Sanskrit, which is Om. The word Om means yes. Simple as that. So it's a bit like so be it. It's a bit like Amen or Aho in Native American Indian. There's many traditions have a similar thing, which is an affirmative. So we're affirming our giving to this moment. So bring your hands to your heart. I suggest rubbing them together. If it feels right, sometimes it feels right to do that. It does to me. If I think about it, I don't know where I'm at. I go to doubt because I'm not in information anymore. Okay, you stay in information, you know what to do. When you feel ready, the hands settle and they move in any way. There's not, you know, there aren't yogis on some sort of Mount Kailash looking down, you know, judging everyone, saying that's right yoga, that's wrong yoga. When you study yoga, you find there are many, various forms of it. So we're breathing, maybe there's movement of the pelvis because we're trying to evoke or we're evoking a sort of giving mentality. And we're going to chant Om, imagining it being instilled or installed rather in the heart. So installing the mantra, that's one of the meanings of this word nyasa, which we get in modern postural yoga is vinyasa. It means to place or to install, in particular a mantra. So we're going to install this mantra, yes, in the heart. What a nice thing to install, by chanting it 3 times. Take a deep breath in, inhale. Two more, deep breath. And the last one, really deep breath. And then more deep breaths at the end of that. So that's yes, yes, yes. Installed in the heart. Yes to what? Well, it's not been specified, has it? So it must be to everything. In other words, the real information of the real moment as it is. Not ideas and concepts like, you know, do you say yes to World War? Well, obviously no. And, you know, not concepts, but the information of the present. Here and now. Not abstractions, but the information of the present. Release your hands when you're ready and put your blanket to one side or towel. You might be using a towel. And then we're going to lay down with the books or blocks underneath the front of the pelvis. So I'll just move my books here slightly irreverently. I'm going to be laying on top of the River Island Veg Everyday Cookery book. Slightly irreverent. Anyway, pelvis goes on the books or blocks. Blocks are better because they don't slip. Or books that don't slip are better. Mine is slipping, that's why I'm saying it. Stretch your legs back once you're on the blocks. So they go onto your pelvis, onto the mons pubis, the pubic mound, which is a mound of fatty tissue that covers the pubic bone. And you stretch the legs back, and it's simple. It's like that. The heels are stretched back. My heels are drifting because I can feel, obviously, if they drift one way or another, there's different stretches going on further up the legs. Now bring your hands next to your mid-ribs, and breathe easy. Identify and feel into the central channel. Now I say the central channel as if there's one invariable structure for this in yoga. In a way there is, it's always anterior to the spine. But in this version that I'm alluding to now, the central channel terminates low down at the pelvic floor. Not all systems have a central channel that ends there, but that's where we're going to end ours, pelvic floor. And then the other end of it comes through the crown of the head, either to the crown of the head or just beyond it. So identify a central channel, feel all the way along it, feel into it through any movements that might help. Inhale, exhale, push down into the floor. And you're just up in a little chaturanga dandasana. Just a little cute, cuddly version of chaturanga dandasana. And of course, the legs and pelvis are being supported, which makes chaturanga dandasana an altogether happier event than it might otherwise be. Movement might happen as part of this, what we might say, investigative. And we're investigating to find openings into the richness, into the information of the present moment. Okay, drop the knees, drop the chest, take a breath or two. So in this position, with the toes tucked under, the knees on the floor, the chin on the floor, the chest on the floor, the hands on the floor, this position has 8 points on the floor, and it represents a sense of giving. A sense of giving or surrender, which is seen in the yoga tradition as essential for reasons that I think are obvious, but we could talk about it if you want. Now come up from there onto your hands and knees and just move your blocks or books or whatever you're using to one side. If you've got a loose fitting t-shirt, because we're going to come into down face dog, it's advisable to tuck it in, otherwise it tends to sort of smother oneself, so you don't want that. Hands further forwards than your shoulders. Have a look at your hands. Now, look at them. Make sure that they're equidistant from the sides of the mat. The left hand is exactly the same distance from the side of the mat as the right hand, and that both hands have the middle fingers facing forwards, and you're spread across the aponeurosis, the connective tissue across the palms of the hands, really well. And then moving the pelvis to feel into contact with the palms. As a point of meditation, meditation just means absorption into something, doesn't it? So sometimes we sort of make it over fanciful, over exotic meditation, but it's just absorption into something. That means everyone knows the experience of meditation because everyone has been absorbed in something at some point. Right? So here, what we're looking to be absorbed in the yoga tradition is the living moment, which is beyond us, therefore we have to give to it. We can't try and cram the living moment into the packages and containers of our own concepts that, well, are small relative to the living moment, which is infinite, it's changing all the time. Now tuck the toes, lift your bum. When you've lifted your bum, have a look at your feet and make sure they are equidistant from the sides of the mat. Now, it's not true to say that the hands and feet have to be the same distance as each other, but the hands have to be the same distance from the side of the mat as each other, and then the feet have to be the same distance from the side of the mat as each other. The hands and feet, they can be wide or narrow relative to each other, that's fine.
And then there's lots of dog poses. The first thing about all the dog poses is palms. And of course, all the dog poses should be serving the same artha, purpose, that is, and that is absorption. So it doesn't matter whether one's right, one's wrong. Are the Iyengar school, are they right? The Scaravelli school right? The Shivananda school right? You know, it doesn't matter about that. You just have to ask yourself, is it absorbing into the richness of the present moment? And are there signs that it's absorbing? You know, and one of the signs is the breath opens up. It comes out of the uncertain breathing when we're not in real information. Well done. Okay, come down. That's great. Regular kneeling position, but don't forget you can and should in many cases put something between the heels and buttocks if your knees have any discomfort whatsoever. You can also put a thinly rolled blanket under your shins. That can be very helpful. Sorry, it's lower shins. Well, it is shins, but lower shins where the ankle bends. That's if you're getting cramped in your foot arches or you just feel tight in the ankles. We're just catching up with our breath with 2 or 3 or 4 deep breaths. Jaw soft, eyes soft, throat soft. Incidentally, FYI as it were, I'm rolling on my shins. Huh? Now, I'm not saying, you know, what I do is what you should do, but I'm also not saying it isn't. What I'm saying is, it's not really that I am doing it, it's just happening. If I am doing anything at all, it's giving. Okay? Giving up my ideas of right and wrong, good and bad, and here and there, and you and me, and surrendering them to the richness of real information in the present. And the movement is part of that, it's serving that. And I know that, I can feel that because the signs are correct. Doubt disappears. Intuition becomes stronger. I feel a sort of confidence that can't be threatened. Because it's not pinning itself on something conditioned or causal. It's spontaneous. Okay, so Vajrasana is a great pose. Obviously, you're massaging the anterior tibialis, you're massaging the buttocks, you're massaging the back. If you want the mundane version, there it is. Now, we're going to lay on our tummies. If you haven't got a fairly thick mat, I've got a fairly thick mat down here, but you might want to put a bit more padding underneath you if you know yourself to be a little bit bony on the pubic bone. Not that it's something you'd probably ever put on a CV, but you never know. So I'm going to use a book. I'm going to use River Cottage Veg every day, if I can make it stand up, that is. It's quite a wobbly book, I'm finding. Okay, I'm going to use a different book. But you can find a book where you can stand up. There we go. That one stands up better. Or use a yoga block, which is totally fine. And actually, well, I won't say better in case you don't have one, but it is better. So you're on your tummy when you're ready. You might have put more padding down, like a towel or a blanket, if you think you might need it. You're up on your elbows, forearms, and wrists, and the book is about arm length ahead of you. Right? And once we've got all that set up, we're up on the elbows, forearms, and wrists. We've got a little bit of traction backwards on the forearms, that is backwards towards the torso. And the purpose of that traction is so that we can stretch forwards. So your traction goes backwards on the arms so that you can pull forward your belly. This side of the belly, that side of the belly, the middle of the belly, the top of the belly, deep belly, the superficial belly, the belly. So basically we're talking about everything between the top of the pelvis and the pubic bone and the beginning of the ribs and the bottom of the breastbone, everything there. And not just at the front, but to the sides as well. So moving, jostling, stretching. Lovely, lovely, enjoyable practice to have, I think. Now we're going to stretch our legs back and bring them fairly close. They don't have to be together. It would be foolish to bring your feet together if your thighs came together before them. Because you'd just be distorting and overstretching various nerves and ligaments, which is just silly. So you don't have to have the feet together, but they're just close. And when you lift your legs, which you can do 2 or 3 more times, feel that you're stretching your inner groins, your
So for me, I flick my leg because I can get access to the inner groin without disturbing the body generally. That works well for me. As I said, just stretching, 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 stretching. Tummy is toned, finding the pelvic floor. And when you're ready, here comes the book into play. You stretch your arms out to the book or block. Now, I quite like to press down, lift up, and stretch further still from the pubis. Now, just because I like it doesn't mean that you will. But I have to offer it in case you do. So that's another thing you could find useful, getting more stretch from the pubis towards the hands. Also, reiteration of the leg position. What we don't want is the heels to turn in. We don't want the heels to turn in. So the buttocks, although toned, which is something we might like to put on our CV, but toned buttocks, they're not squeezing together. They're toned, but they're not squeezing together. And they'll tone up a little more if you let your feet come off the floor. Remember, they don't have to be together. It's super useful to feel from the pelvic floor a channel that you imagine and feel. A sort of living, alive channel that runs along the front of the spine. So you start with the pelvic floor and you viscerally imagine it, if you know what I mean. You sort of viscerally imagine it. You've got to breathe into it because remember, if your breath is going shallow, it indicates that you're not in real information. Okay, well done, come down. That's probably long enough. Rest one hand on top of the other. Rest your head on your hand. Let's have some deep breaths, plural. And let's observe as we take these deep breaths, as we allow these deep breaths, let's observe the buttocks releasing away from each other. So there's a certain naturalness. Certain naturalness. It's great if you can develop this awareness of the central channel, known by various names in various traditions. Madhya Nadi is the most straightforward. It just means the middle channel. Now we're going to come back up onto our elbows and forearms and wrists, so go ahead with that, and still stay aware of the central channel, Madhya Nadi, also known as the Avadhuta, also known as the Sushumna. We want to stretch it. We want to stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch it. And so we imagine it running immediately anterior to our spines from as low down as it's possible to feel. So that's the pelvic floor muscles, pubococcygeus and so on. And so you feel from the pelvic floor muscles, which are muscles between the pubic bone and tailbone. Now, isn't it nice to have the opportunity to even perceive? You know, this is what I mean by real information. A lot of the time we're imagining the future, we're imagining the past, we're dealing with various concepts, but it's real, isn't it? Feeling the reality of the muscles between the tailbone and pubic bone, the reality. Okay, and just think how easy we feel into things that are completely not real, you know, abstract concepts, like money, for example. Stretch the arms back by your sides and be on your thumbs, a little bit Superman-ish. Breathing deep. Other superheroes are available, by the way. And then we're going to lift the legs without turning the heels in. Right? So your feet can be a little way apart, you're finding the pelvic floor. Not everyone likes this because your back muscles work and we're not used to that. And that challenges the sort of modus operandi that we imagine is comfortable, but it's really comfortably numb. Wonderful song by Pink Floyd. So, you know, being challenged, of course, is very important, very good. Light tummy in tummy, find the pelvic floor, breathing deep, studying. Okay, well done, come down, you've probably been there long enough. One hand on top of the other, rest your head on your hands. Take deep breaths. This pose, Shavasana, I should perhaps have warned you already, it's too late now, you've done it. It stimulates a lot of energy. So later on in the day, you might find yourself suddenly cleaning out some cupboards or something. You know, like, gotta clean out those cupboards. So just should warn you about that, I suppose. And come back onto your elbows, forearms, and wrists again. Anytime you're like, yeah, good, that was a quick response. Good job. Stretch that tummy again, multiple times. It's great at stretching the aponeurosis, which we call the abdominal sheath. So aponeurosis is connective tissue. Now this abdominal sheath goes either side of the rectus abdominis, from the other muscles adjacent to it, and it sheaths the rectus abdominis. Rectus abdominis is the central band of abdominal tissue in all of us, of course. It's a six-pack. In everyone here, we all have, of course, a wonderful six-pack. Now we're stretching the legs back again, and we're going to see if we can reach one leg. Okay. Oh, got it. I got it. Oh my God. Keep calm and passive in the opposite buttock. Breathe calmly. Breathe calmly. Calm and passive in the opposite buttock. Breathe calmly. So we don't want any tightening up to go on in the opposite buttock. Of course, the piriformis inside the pelvis, very, very close to the sciatic nerve. Sometimes the sciatic nerve even runs through it. So we want to keep passive inside the pelvis. Release and breathe again, nice and deep. Again, some movement side to side to stretch. So remember, movement side to side comes under the category of play, but play in yoga is always purposed. It's not just play for its own sake, it's purpose, for the purpose of absorption. Okay, other leg up when you're ready. Take hold of that. And take a few deep breaths. So play is purposed for absorption. So if you're moving side to side or feeling into the body in any kind of way at all, the purpose is to disappear more deeply, more completely into real information. And then the signs of that include the breath coming out, the body relaxing as well. The body feels more relaxed when you're resting in real information. Okay, well done, release, and place that leg back down again. Take 2 or 3 or 4 breaths. You might wag your bum a little bit to loosen the lumbar vertebrae, the large bones of the lumbar. And then we've got a choice to repeat one leg at a time or to take hold of both simultaneously. That's up to you. Be calm though. I love this pose because it really does feel like old-fashioned wrestling, such as used to be on the television in the 1970s and 80s, with people like Giant Haystacks and Big Daddy. But it feels like you're wrestling yourself. There's no one else in the ring. I quite like that. If you want, if you're calm enough, the chest might even feel like it wants to lift, and then you might want to get more length and height, which you do by deepening, visualizing and feeling the deepening of the scapula, shoulder blades, into the back ribs, and then the chest lifts up and over that support. And it's a meditation. It's not an exercise, not forceful, it's intimate. Intimate. Feeling the central channel, I think, is super helpful. Great. Okay, well done. Down you come. Rest one hand on top of the other, and you can just go, a bit. If your back feels uncomfortable, just honest to God, don't worry about it. You know? You're just using muscles that we don't use that often. And of course, with many of us at home more, stuck in the house more, chances are our muscles are even tighter than usual. So we're going to roll over now onto our side. If you can, if it's positioned that way, that you can roll and face towards the screen, and do that. But if it's not positioned that way, it actually doesn't matter one blooming bit. Okay, so great, good job, one and all. You're going to rest your head on your hand, just like I'm doing here. The other hand is a sort of stabilizer to stop you, like that, stop you falling over onto your face. Okay. And then you're going to use that other hand, the stabilizer hand, to press into the floor, to lift and extend the bottom ribs towards the armpit multiple times. You're feeling into it. I often close my eyes because you don't need an external reference, you need an internal reference. And obviously when you're extending your ribs towards your armpit, you should also then extend your armpit towards your elbow so that you don't jam all the energy up into the shoulder. Breathing through your nose. I quite like a roll about. That is to say, rolling on the underleg, forwards and backwards, and it's a massage. And because you're a yogin, you're a practitioner of yoga, why you're practicing is to disappear, we say as a metaphor, into the goddess, right? And we say because the goddess is liberative, because she negates clinging. So translating all that into more mundane language, it means the goddess is the real information of the present moment. And the real information of the present moment is interdependent. Our concepts of reality is all divided up, you and me, here and there, but reality itself is not listening to our concepts, doesn't give a jot about our concepts. It's interdependent. So as you move, as you feel into your body, you're feeling into, first what we think of as our body, but very soon we can feel it's interdependent with itself. In other words, the nervous system, the breath, the psychology, the muscles, the fascia, all affect each other. But it's also interdependent in a much wider way as well. Psychology is affected by environment, our physicality is also affected by our environment, by what we eat, by what the air is like, by what the temperature is like. Need I go on? So that's a real experience of interdependence. And that's what yogins are looking for. As you roll, you're looking to be absorbed initially into that through a sense of the richness of your sensations increasing. I could just roll and roll. And sometimes you find a very intense moment because the IT band, which is a band of connective tissue on the outer leg, does often show up in the same way that the sinuses show up. Subtle tensions that you could miss because we get used to running on a certain, as I said earlier, comfortably numb sort of paradigm. Okay, that's great. We could roll and roll. I hope some of you enjoy it half as much, at least, as I do. Knees up, come up from the side. That is to say, push with your hand, and then you go straight back down again because you're bipedal, ain't you? So when you're ready, you're going on the other side. Just move that cookery book and resting your head similarly. Obviously, you can take time to get the hand position right for you. And obviously the neck is different on different days, and so you can jostle it around until it feels right. Then take the other hand when you're ready and press into the floor and extend your bottom ribs. More than once, several times. And extend and extend and extend and extend so that you increase your contact. Now what that's doing is increasing the intensity of the sensation, so you get sucked in to the body, as it were, which itself is a portal to this interdependent field. So you get into the body, which is a concept, isn't it? My body, this body, in a male, female, young, old, these are all concepts. But you get into the actuality of it by moving, lifting, extending multiple times, and then rolling too. And the actuality of the body is the access to the actuality of the field, Krishnam in Sanskrit, of interdependence. The field of interdependence, which is described in the tradition as a goddess who's dancing all the time, and she's the universe, you know. And the universe is a concept, isn't it, that sounds like you could be outside of it. But the reality is, you know, every single electron in the universe is connected to every single electron in the universe. One shifts, they all shift. And there's many other examples of interdependence that I'm sure you're aware of as well. So the concept of interdependence is one thing, but we want to feel it as a field, as a tangible field. That's why we're rolling, looking for sensations that pull you out of concepts about the moment and into the wonderful richness of the real thing. You know? Sometimes it happens naturally, doesn't it? You turn a corner and there's an amazing sunset you weren't expecting to see, and for a moment you forget to run your programs. The sensation's rich enough to suck you in, right? Despite other pulls. It's a bit like getting close enough to a black hole. You know, you get close enough, it's going to suck you in. Right?
So intensity is how we get close. Right? Intense beauty, intense sadness, intense sensation of any kind. Intense deliciousness. Okay, we could play that out, but we're not going to. A bit longer, we're going to come up when we're ready by pushing into the floor. Good job. Now, for this next pose, again, many of us will need, let me get my books back so I can be empathic to those without yoga blocks. No doubt you could probably buy yoga blocks second-hand on eBay for next to nothing. I never looked, but I imagine you could. So if you did want yoga blocks for this Zoom period, who knows how long it's going to go on for, you could always get a couple. But I'm going to use blocks for now to empathize with anyone who doesn't have yoga blocks. I've just discovered that my River Cottage Veg Every Day cookbook is a bit too glossy, sliding around like there's no tomorrow, so I'm going to swap that. So don't pick glossy books. Today's new tip. So we're going to start with our legs over to one side. Obviously give yourself enough support that your knees don't feel compressed because they are twisting. And if there's any even minor tear within the meniscus, and the meniscal tears are very, very common, even if they're only very small, then, you know, it can be uncomfortable, but you can make that, alleviate that by sitting up higher. My other trick, I have to confess with you, for meniscal problems is what I call knee nuts. That's nuts that you put in the back of your knee, right? So nuts in shells, I could get one, but like a pecan or a walnut, something like that, and you literally put them in the back of your knees and then fold the knee, and that can be wonderful and very simple solution. So you can pick smaller nuts or whatever, something in the back of the knees, or even a folded piece of tissue paper will do it. Anyway, it's another tip. Top leg up and over the bottom leg when you're ready. And then lift and shift your bum until it feels right. One foot should be back, one foot should be forwards. Don't forget you can sit higher if you need to. So, what do I mean by lift and shift until it feels right? I mean lift your bum and shift it, probably away from the bottom leg foot. But do it in a way that you can feel all the fibers, like so many strings. I used to have the book, I'm sure you used to have it too, Gulliver's Travels when I was a kid, and I used to be fascinated by the picture of Gulliver being pinned down by his clothes and his hair and everything by the little teeny Lilliputians, I think they were called. Well, your body's like that. It's full of these sort of fibrous connections, like spider webs, and they don't always agree with each other. So that's why we're lifting and shifting, and hopefully you can feel that tensegrity and you can intuit positions that bring their fibers into a more agreeable position for the bones. So the bones can find a more peaceful position, and that makes a more peaceful position for the nerves and for bursa, which is fluid-filled sacs around the joints and so on. Eyes can be closed if you like. Breathing through your nose is recommended. Softening the sinuses. So, thing is, softening the sinuses, you can't do that abstractly, just for sinuses. The abstraction of sinuses away from psychology is purely a mental construct and not a reality. The reality is interdependence. So if you're to soften your sinuses, it's for sure that there's going to be a softening emotionally and mentally as well, necessarily so. And that's why this is so wonderful. There may be subtle movement. Fascia is like so many strings, as I said. And it does melt. Obviously there are strings on top of strings on top of strings, because fascia is forming all the time. Where you don't move, it just keeps building up. And if there's areas that you just don't move at all or hardly at all, the fascia builds up thicker and thicker and thicker, and that eventually can be problematic if it's too thick. because it can start pressing on nerves, it can start interrupting blood flow, it can cause therefore high blood pressure and other problems as well. So moving a little, it might be an intuitive way that one is melting some of these strings. And your breath is your gauge. It's your compass, if you like. It's telling you if you're heading due north or not, which is a metaphor for real information. So your breath should be relaxed. Not only is that a sign that you're in real information, but it's also a way to get back to real information. To come out of shallow breath. Okay, it's another one I could lose time in, but only because I'm moving subtly, to be honest. If I was holding it, I think it would have a different feel. But we're going to slow and easy, right? Because for some of us, many of us, it's like, whoa, my hips, good Lord. And then we're going to bring our legs over to side two. So you sit on side. Similarly, your legs over to one side, breathing easy. And then lifts and shifts are helpful, even from the get-go. And when you're ready, the top leg up and over, I'm exaggerating the movement, but you can see the movement like that. And then lift and shift, these various fibrous relationships. So this is just a way of visually feeling. You know, whatever you visualize is just a correlate, something that correlates to your actual experience. And hopefully, if it correlates closely enough, you'll be able to directly communicate with your actual experience. So we can visualize fascia as so many fibers, and in a sense it is, you know, you can actually see that it is. But it's more complicated than that, because there are nerves in the fascia. The fascia penetrates not just into muscle, but forms the foundation for muscles. In the same way that I don't eat meat, but you know, I know sausages have got this sort of skin around them. Meat sausages, vegetarians don't. Vegetarian sausages are just weird, whatever they are. But they kind of skin around them. In the body, your muscle cells have fascia around, and then they're gathered together into muscle spindles, and they're bundled up until it becomes a muscle. So that's how integral fascia is. And that's why we tend to not call it fascia, but myofascia. The fascia that interpenetrates also with muscles. There's visceral fascia too, that interpenetrates with organs. There's superficial fascia that sits near the skin that holds the fat cells. So we can move in a way that perhaps we visualize a melting of less useful, in terms of the body's flow and spaciousness, less useful fascial connections. And they've just come because fascia connects in a way that's relatively arbitrary. It just happens all the time, and it builds up when you don't move. So when you're moving in certain areas, it doesn't build up. If you're regularly moving in certain ways, fascia just doesn't build up now. But if you're not, then it does. And the signs of melting fascia, merging with reality, letting your mental correlation, you're actually jumping over into the real information that it's trying to describe. Signs include deep breathing, breath that comes out into a more relaxed breath pattern, a sense of absorption, a sense of contentment, and various other yamas and niyamas that are mentioned in yoga tradition all come up as signs. Non-violence, for example, is when we're merged with living reality, we feel the interdependence of it. It doesn't really kind of correlate to think of, you know, opposing one thing by another, because there isn't another. You know? There's only one thing, and that's what the tradition says too, that the Godhead is one. Okay, nice and easy release. Well done. This is, of course, Gomukhasana, one of the versions of Gomukhasana. Now we're going to come into Upavishta Konasana. So again, blocks are useful for many, but the blocks should be turned around. So instead of being this way around when we sit on them, they're going to be this way around when we sit on them. And this represents you. It's much too small and the book's much too big. There's you sitting on a block. The corner of the block comes forwards of the pubic symphysis, which is a slip of cartilage between the two halves of the pubic bone. The reason for sitting on a block with your thighs free, and you don't have to sit on a block, but most people do benefit from it, is so that the thighs actually can have some drop down. They're not being pushed up by the block, they're free at the top. But the sitting bones are supported. So in this way, you're really supporting the release of your psoas. Now we're not coming into Samakonasana, which is box splits. Not coming into that. You might think, yes, you're right, Jim, I am not coming to box splits. This is Upavishta Konasana, which is a narrower stride than the box splits. So the stride I've got here is just about okay for me because I can reach my big toes here. But if you can't, you bring your legs closer until you can reach your big toes. And if you can't reach your big toes, however close your legs are, wonderful solution is you don't reach your big toes, right? And you just bring your legs a bit closer until you nearly reach them, and that's the right distance for you. So that's how you ascertain the distance, holding the big toes, dropping the thighs. You know, if you can hold the big toes with a relatively wide stride, you might find the block actually isn't helpful. I can work with it, but you know, that's fine to lose it as well. But most people definitely, most people, more than 90%, will get more benefit from the block than not. Okay, so we're either holding the big toes, well, we were all trying to hold the big toes and then bring the legs closer until we nearly can, and then we're releasing the big toes once we've got our distance, and then drawing the buttock flesh out and back. So drawing the buttock flesh out and back. Obviously the legs should be equidistant as well, okay? Take your hands cupped like that, just show me your hands. Great, just wave to me so I know you're there. Yay, thanks. And then turn your hands so your fingers face behind you. And then roll your chest, as it were, up and over the shoulder. So do that as your tummy draws in and lift up your waist. So your waist all the way around feels lifted and tall. And you can help get that into a more integral feeling through subtle movement. Left and right and so on. So the shoulder blades are going down the back, the chest is going up, the breathing's deep, and you're looking for integration, so you're moving hither and thither, looking for integration, melting areas like the inner thigh muscles, adductor brevis, longus magnus, pectineus, and gracilis, and melting the inner thigh muscles through movement, through attitude, through breath. Movement, attitude, and breath. Some of the tools you can use. And attitude is one that I think is very important and very powerful. So if I have an attitude of giving, of a sort of almost, well, it's like gratitude actually. When you feel grateful, you want to give, don't you? That's just how it is. So you have an attitude of gratitude here and now. And you want to give the body back to nature. In other words, the tension and tightness that we drive into the body by being someone, going somewhere, we become very, very willing indeed to let it go. Absolutely, like profoundly willing. Because we know once the goddess takes over, it sort of suffuses us, as it were. She'll dance through us, we'll realize she always has. And clinging is automatically, spontaneously negated. So I hope you're breathing freely. I hope you're moving where you need to keep a sense of flow. I hope you're iterating and then reiterating length, lightness in the lumbar, sitting up above your hips. And then we're going to lift and turn towards our right foot. And just have a look over at your right toes. And then you can admire them. You can look at them and just think, what lovely toes I have. Oh, they're lovely. You can just look at them. Now, breathing into it, you might lean forwards from the crease at the top of your thigh on that same leg a little towards your foot. But if you do, it might just be a little tiny bit. You should feel equal sensation stretching into the back leg. Then, of course, the signs, the Lakshana in Sanskrit means signs, are always where we go to, and the signs are the breath should be coming into a more, what we could call confident breath, or relaxed breath, or natural breath, or unthreatened breath. Some people, the pelvis just, keeps releasing and keep going forward, so that's fine. We're not going to inhibit any natural movements forwards, but we're also not going to manufacture any. We're not going to manufacture any, because if you do any manufacturing, you bring tension into the body. Not just into the muscles, but into the nerves, which then also affect the fascia. The fascia has been proven to be affected by the state of the nervous system. And it's proven that it affects its hydration. Okay, cool, calm, collected, other nice words beginning with C, and then you turn the other way. Breathing through your nose, if you can. Remember those soft sinuses from the beginning of the class, which is a psychophysical, universal experience. It's a psychophysical, universal, I'm daring to say, because it's true, and why not speak the truth? And we're turning, but we're feeling the back leg. So in the same way that a boat leaves a wake behind it as it travels forwards, if we do any traveling forwards towards the other foot and leg, we should feel an equal and opposite release and extension into the back leg. And that's your meditative discipline. Don't start thinking, oh, I'm no good at yoga because my chest isn't close to my leg. That's not yoga. There are 12-year-old gymnasts who easily flick their chest to their legs with their legs much wider. They're not yogi stuff. Yogis are people who are using their experience, in this case the bodily experience, to disappear into the goddess, the real information of the living moment. And in so doing, one becomes knowledgeable about what the living moment is and knowledgeable about your essence foundation. I'm just quoting the texts there. So the reason I say breath is everything is because it's the truth teller in these situations. It tells you that you're merging with or not real information. If it comes deep and natural, you're merging with real information. And that's what a yogi is, someone who's doing that. Flexibility, that's another subject. That's not a yoga subject. Inhale, come up. Okay, well done. Oh, those legs. Hope you can bring them back together. Fingers crossed. Have a go. Yeah, you can go. You got it. Stop. Now we're going to bring the soles of the feet together and knees apart. You can sit, if you've got an available wall, with your back against the wall with a block turned up this way, touching the floor, and running along the length of your sacrum, the bony plate between the buttock flesh. That's a very nice way indeed to do it. If there's a wall nearby, I would recommend that to you. If there's a person nearby, you could do it back to back. I would recommend that to you. I know there's at least 2 groups with 2 people in. So you could do back to back. And why not? Don't be shy. You might be shy of that person. Oh, never so shy. You could go back to back with them. Anyway, either way, yeah, go on. Come on, go back to back. That's it. Sorry, I'm just encouraging people who've got a person there because it is nicer because it's so warm too. Anyway, back to back or against the wall, or if you don't have those options, straight in the room. One thing I find very useful, especially if you're not already back to back with someone, is to place your hands on the floor and lift your bum up. And then you get a lengthening effect in the psoas. As you lift up, you get a lengthening up through the psoas, which is a muscle that comes from the top of the inner thighs across the lateral pubis into the sides of the lower spine up to the beginning of the ribs. That's how you say about the psoas. And then breathing, meditating, disappearing, giving. Breathing, meditating, disappearing, giving. Not an abstract idea of giving, but a real experience of giving, like you might give to music if you're out dancing. Like you might give to a hug if you get a hug or give a hug or a part of a hug with someone that you love. Or like you might give to the intense beauty of artwork, which is a beautiful painting that I have on the wall behind me by Antonio Thompson, very good artist indeed, as you can see. So again, movement could be of service to us here. And the service is the service of delivering us to the goddess, which I think is nice to describe as a goddess because there is this sense of beauty, there is a sense of deliverance, there is a sense of power, that she has the power to cross you over when you deliver yourself to her. So a great yogini, I'll use the feminine term for a yoga practitioner, a great yogini gets more and more from less and less. She doesn't need loads of poses. She doesn't need 127 poses, or anything like that. She just needs one. That's all she needs. She's got enough to disappear into the infinite. Okay, well done, release. Nice and easy. If you're back to back with someone, it's really hard to release because they're so warm and nice and soft and all that. Anyway, we're going to hold our big toes next, so don't sit on a block for this. Well done for prizing yourself off from each other's warm backs, those of you that did get to sit back. Hold your big toes. Sanskrit for both, ubaya. And abaya is a different way. Ubaya, and big toes, padangushta. This is called ubaya padangushta asana. You lean back until your feet come light. Could just be very light. You're leaning your pelvis back so you come towards the back of the buttocks. Not that there's a front of the buttocks, but the lower part of the buttocks. And then you begin to raise your legs by degrees. It doesn't have to be much. It could be raise one leg or raise the other or neither. They could pulse like mine are here. So it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. And the result that we want is absorption. I know that isn't the proper line from the song. So although you might see in a yoga book someone with straight legs or legs together or, all of that, that's modern postural yoga. It's an invention in the last 80, 90 years, possibly a bit longer actually. 180 years, I think we could probably push it back 180 years. modern postural yoga. But yoga is not new. And so apply yoga principles to modern postural yoga postures, and then you've got a genuine, real part of the yoga tradition. So the principle is absorption, Purusha Prakriti. Purusha, essence, nature, revealed by merging with Prakriti. The philosophy of Sankhya Yoga, the philosophy of Patanjala Yoga. So movement might happen. Remember, you're not trying to copy a posture. You're using your bodily experience to be absorbed in the goddess. It's a very different thing. I'm not trying to copy a posture. Using bodily movement to be absorbed in the goddess. We don't want any wall behind us to support us. We've got to lean back in this one. Okay, well done. It's got, I like them all. Of course I like them all. It's what I do for a job, isn't it? Release and take a breath or two. Now we're going to try squatting. Nowadays a lot of people call this malasana, but it's not really malasana. So just squatting. Okay, now many of us will need support under our heels for one of two reasons. Tensile resistance, because the calcaneus tendon is a little short. Or compressive resistance, because the lower part of your tibia compresses against the bones of the upper foot, the talus at the top of the foot. So please do put support under your heels if the heels don't easily come to the floor. The toes don't have to face forwards, they just should be naturally placed in the position that feels right for you. And in this version, we've got our arms coming through the inside of our legs, and a little movement can be great, especially around the pelvic floor muscles, iliococcygeus, pubococcygeus, puborectalis, and coccygeus, 4 muscles that essentially run between the tailbone and the pubic bone. And of course, it's not just muscles, it's myofascia and fascia, just isolated fascia as well, of various kinds. So move to meditate. Meditate on a release that shows up in your breath and your body, particularly in this case, tailbone. And this is one of the best poses you can possibly do, I think, in terms of its potential to become absorbed and to use many signs in the body, like the erector spinae group of muscles along the back, releasing. That's a good sign of you settling into information. Marvelous and wonderful as this pose is, just keeping half an eye on the time there. We'll probably have to come out of this pose. We certainly will at some point. So we're going to come out of it now. The next thing we're going to do, having prepped the back like that, is we're going to take something firm and stable. Now this is a cork yoga block, which is a kind of ideal thing. This is a bamboo yoga block, which is also ideal. I slightly prefer myself the cork ones, but you could also use books as long as you could be sure that they are steady. But you could use something else as well. If you have a piece of wood without splinters or something, that would work okay as well. Something that will support your weight when you're squatting on it. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to come up onto whatever it is. So I've jumped up onto these books quite enthusiastically, I have to admit. And then we come down to a squat with the heels up. It's a squat with the heels up. Now coming up into blocks essentially pushes your knees up a little so that you can lean forwards between your legs and take some breaths like that. And that's enough usually. We don't want to let the legs just fall away from each other. There is a little intelligent tone in the inner thigh muscles, the adductors. We're going to place the tricep which is obviously on the outer arm, the tricep. I'm showing you my tricep in case you're interested. There it is. Outer arm. Boom, against the shin, like that. Boom, which is the seed syllable of Shiva, by the way, but anyway, like that. Against both outer shin, both front shins. And that affects a really useful stretch in the groins and all the way through the back to the tailbone. So just breathe into that. Now, it's more than enough going on for most of us, but one or two people have this sort of sense of excitement, like feeling like there's another horizon they want to poke or explore, and there indeed is. And so if you want, you could lean forwards, and probably you don't want to land your face on the floor, so you have to push with your hands and lift your bum up, so you can still stay on your toes, and then eventually the feet can lift up, potentially anyway. And you breathe into that any way you can. Landing calm and slow, nice and gentle on books, make sure they don't slip. Landing calm and slow. And back onto your hands and knees. Have a little wiggle, take a few breaths. Almost penultimately now, we're going to take the right knee behind the right wrist, directly behind it, onto the floor, behind the wrist. Keeping the knee more or less there, we're going to move the right foot across diagonally while the knee stays more or less in the same position, and then we stretch back the other leg. First thing to say is if there's any pain in your knee, lean towards it. Right? It sounds counterintuitive, but it's not. You think about it. So you lean towards it if there's any pain in your knee at all, tightness, pain, anything. Just temporarily. That gives the hip a bit of a chance to open up, and then the hip begins to absorb the stretch. Anyway, we're staying a little bit lifted, so we could be on fingertips, or one or two people find it comfortable to have one hand on their leg and one hand on the foot. That's another option, and we're stretching deliberately, intentionally, meditatively up through the front of the spine. So again, for me, it's an eye closed kind of thing, or half closed. So I can visually feel energy going up through the front of the spine. Okay, visually feel. The sukhasana on the back leg, the inner groin across the lateral pubic bone. Could probably do with a little massage, so don't be shy to move side to side. Okay. Breath is everything. Tuck under your back toes. Come out by leaning forwards again and coming back to hands and knees. Take a couple of deep breaths, again a little wag of your tail, deep, honest breathing, and then when you're ready, there goes the other knee, directly behind the other wrist, and the foot moves diagonally across the body, and you stretch back. And I'll remind you again to lean towards the bent knee if there's any discomfort in it. Simply because if you lean over the foot, there's more pressure down, which means that the floor resists back up more, and that's where pressure can come on the medial meniscus, which we want to avoid. We don't want to think, oh, I can put up with that. You may well be able to put up with it, but it's not a good idea to. So, toning the tummy, hands on the floor, looking to extend up all the way along through the anterior spine. All the way along through the anterior spine, and massage your own way into it intuitively. But your intuition is backed up by your breath, which becomes, expressive. Much more traditional than to call these poses asana is to call them karana. Karana, which can mean expressive movement and expression. An action that's expressive. Karana. So breath comes and goes. Meditating into it, playing into it.
Okay, okay. Come forwards, tuck the toes, back to hands and knees. Take a breath. One little but last down face dog. Let's do it. As soon as you feel ready, come up. A brief but efficient check of the equidistance of the palms and feet. From the sides and front of the mat, or sides and back of the mat in the case of the feet. Feel through your inner armpits and inner groins. And the inner armpit, or outer chest as it could also be known, should lengthen, should feel like it's opening. The inner groin can either lift or draw back. But your overall aim is to get energy going through your back. Through your back. Well done, everyone. Come down nice and easy. Said it will be short, indeed it was. We're going to have to come get ready for our Shavasana, but before we come into Shavasana, that is corpse pose, we're going to have a little hug. No, I didn't mean you and me. Well, yes, I did. Come on in. Love you. Now, when we've had our hug, we're going to hug our legs as well. So lay on your back and give your legs a hug. That was a lovely hug. Thanks ever so much. Here's a reality. Space doesn't divide us. We only think it does. It doesn't though. Now give your legs a hug and have a roll about. So you can lay on your back and just have a roll about. So you roll left, you roll right. You know, and obviously it massages the back, the head can roll with the legs, as you like. And what we want is to disappear into the goddess, which is the richness of the living moment. And once you've had a long enough roll around, which actually, probably we could roll around for ages, but we're slow and easy, come out of that and ready ourselves to come into Shavasana. In other words, corpse pose. Make sure you're warm enough because, it's a little chilly in the Ook at the moment, UK. And when we're in, I'll read to you from the Dattatreya Yoga Shastra. There it is, Yoga Shastra of Dattatreya. About corpse pose, very short. Now in corpse pose, the legs shouldn't be too wide. I know there are yoga teachers telling people to take their legs wide. And I'm tracking them down one by one and saying, stop saying that to people, because the lower back can't fully relax if the legs are too wide. The diaphragm can't fully release if the legs are too wide. On the other hand, many people commonly don't take the arms wide enough. You need to feel space around the outer edges of your collarbones. The head should be comfortably tilted towards your chest. Not much, but enough. So you can do that either by extending the back of your skull with your hands, or where necessary, placing a support underneath the occiput, the back of the skull. So settling, and then in a moment I'll read to you as we just start by giving the weight. Now I'm going to read to you from the Dattatreya Yoga Shastra in a couple of minutes about this pose, what it says. Concentrate her eyes and mind at the thumb or left or right foot, lying down on the ground, posing her mouth skyward like a dead body, is also a good sanketa, a good practice, absorption practice. If a yogini practices it at a lonely place, keeping her body in a loose position, she must gain success. Of course, success means the realization spontaneously of who you've always been and always will be, aside from ideas and opinions and habits, what we call essence. Feel the complete surrender of the entire body. Total, entire, complete. Experience the spontaneous liberation that happens on that moment of complete, total release. Recognize what it is, what that feeling is, that liberation, and affirm to yourself that I am that. That's who I am. And now a little wiggle of your fingers and toes, ankles and wrists. And when ready, bend your legs. Tuck under the buttocks. And further, allow a moment of release for your lower back. So a little tuck under, and then a deep breath, and the lower back releases entirely into the breath. Maybe a couple of those. Very profound feeling. Total release of the lower back. The lower back, of course, is where many of the parasympathetic nerves emanate from. So releasing the lower back has a profound effect. Roll onto your left side when you're ready. To your left side. Both arms come over with you, knees are drawn up. The tummy should be soft. Soft tummy. When you're ready, roll again and lay comfortably on your other side. Coming up from the side in your own time. Wonderful and marvelous.